What is the single most you'll understand it when you're older thing? Time off. Working crazy hours in my early 20s was nice because I had a lot of money, but as I became older and more involved with my now fiancé and my friends, I realized that there's a balance. This drove me to look for a job with a little less pay but far better hours, and now I'm happy. Don't work like a slave, you'll miss a lot of good things in life. Man, I don't know how parents in particular survived before the microwave oven. I'm a reasonably not incompetent home cook. I understand there's nothing you can do with a microwave that you can't do without one, but doing without requires a lot more time, attention, and planning ahead, all of which are in very short supply with little kids underfoot. Also, unsolicited LPT, use the lower power settings. They do take longer, but they allow the heat to diffuse out of the hot spots faster than it accumulates, so you get a nice, evenly heated meal, and not an ice salad with lava dressing. Understanding why your parents wanted you to go play with the awkward kid, or why they were so keen to help you make friends. It's beyond annoying as a kid when your parents try to guide who make friends with, but most parents instinctually know that bad social habits start early, are hard to break, and can be a real burden when you are older. My mom never liked my friend group and it really annoyed me. Looking back, half of them were assholes anyway, and the other half were already doing things that led them into a life of drug addiction after high school. I never got into drinking and drugs like that, but everyone around me was doing it and I had every opportunity to. Looking back, she was just looking out for me, and even though she didn't have proof of what we were doing, she was just an adult who had lived and could tell it wasn't a good group of friends. Why elderly people in nursing homes who get no visitors are so lonely and filled with despair. We had to put my mom in a home because we physically could not care for her anymore. She didn't want to be there and we didn't want her to be. But there weren't any other options. My dad was there every day until he got sick and died. My sister and I stopped in a couple of times a week each. The last month of her life I was there every day. I hope she knew I did the best I could to take care of her. In high school I used to volunteer at an old people's homes, and a lot of them were not nice, some even racist. The best was an older gentleman who initially did not like me, but after I got in a fight and he saw what he knew was a black eye, we spoke about fighting a lot. He was a bully / drunken boxer his day, and to be honest, he, over the 2 years I would visit, would love to tell me, tall perhaps, tales of fights. He'd like to recall how he was tough and was hurting people. When he passed I saw that there was almost no one who came to see the body and was pretty much already forgotten even before death. Coming from an East Indian family where they force feed you the whole family is family, respect your elders, it was a shock to the system for sure. Friendships fading away. I remember my dad telling me all kinds of cool stories about things him and his friends did in the past. I even asked him, why aren't you still friends with these people? He really did basically say, it's complicated, you'll understand when you're older. Even back then I remember thinking, that's crazy, me and my friends will always be friends. Sitting here now in my early 30s and it really hits home. High school drama isn't important. Like, at all. This is very true. That said, some people will carry their high school behavior with them into the adult world and especially into the workplace, so it's important to keep your guard up and learn how to deal with those types. It is possible to do everything right and still fail. Don't let it consume you. Pick up the pieces and move on. I had to learn this after a project that I was on for 3 years was sabotaged and shit canned. I did some amazing work, and poured my life into that project. In the end I had nothing to show for it. It put me in a real slump for a few years. I'm still trying to pull myself out of it without becoming a cynical and jaded asshole. Hand-me-downs. I absolutely hated them, even though my grandma was a genius with them. Dyeing, artistic patches, new buttons. They just didn't last compared to the new clothes my older sister had. Then I had 3 boys in 6 years. I'm seriously grateful that my grandma tried so hard to make my hand-me-downs look good. I get it now. I totally thought that I was going to buy all new cute stuff for my kiddo. Then the pandemic hit and I hate buying online. My brother came by with an enormous bag full of clothes from size 18M3T and my sil had kept them all in pristine condition despite the fact that most of them had been worn by both of my nephews, and I'm so grateful. Kiddo won't need new clothes for at least a year, hopefully. He's growing fast. Same when I lost weight really rapidly. Buying new clothes is too expensive when they're going to be hanging off you in 2 months. Go to the thrift store. Edit. OMG. This is the first time that one of my comments has been so popular. And I got an award too, thank you for that. Thrift stores rule. But buy new underwear. New underwear is a basic human right. Winky face. Why my parents would look disgusted eating/drinking anything that was sweet. I never understood why they watered down juice until now. When adults said something was too sweet, I literally couldn't comprehend that phrase. It was an oxymoron to me. Sweet equals good. How can something be too good? Now I completely understand. Something a little more lighthearted, but about half the jokes on cartoons like SpongeBob take on a whole new light once you've got more experience under your belt. You either die as SpongeBob or live long enough to become a Squidward. Time, wasting time, and how time flies. It's mid-deck and I'm saying to myself, what the heck, it's been 9 months of COVID and I can't believe this year is almost over. As you age it seems to go faster and faster. When I was younger I felt like time just dragged on some days. I can remember when I was school age, the year seemed to drag on forever, then when it did end we had the 6 weeks holidays. 6 whole weeks. With hour upon hour of sunshine, towards the end of it school was but a distant memory. It felt like it would never end. Of course it always did when September finally arrived. Now I work at a school and it's terrifying how quickly we blaze through each term. Those same holidays are over in a flash. I think it's because now I'm older I'm consciously worried about making the most of the time off, not wasting it. When I was young the biggest worry was whether my friends and I would play in the woods or on the fell that day. Time wasn't a worry, we thought we had all the time in the world. Literally getting older. Never thought much about when adults would say you're still young, just enjoy it. I always wanted to be older because I was tired of HS, wanted to be out of college, etc. Now I want aging to slow down a bit. The thing that is the worst about getting older is seeing your parents and other loved ones age and eventually pass away. When you're a kid, even a high school age kid, you assume these people will just be around forever and things will always stay the same as they were. It makes it easier to be disrespectful and generally take them for granted. I'm now 35, and this year was the first where I started noticing physical limitations with my dad especially, and that was hard. They're minor for now, but it's only going to get worse. The biggest blow to me is realizing I likely have less than 20 years left with my parents. Losing that constant source of love and support will be hard to take. They've been a rock my entire life. What parents sacrifice just so you can do something fun? Last night my husband and I sat in a line of cars for an hour and a half so our kids could see this cheesy drive-through light display in my town with Santa and other characters. 0/10 not worth it for us, but the kids loved it and it was worth it to see them be able to do a fun Christmas activity during a pandemic. It made me think of how much my parents had to endure taking my brother and I to theme parks and stuff as a kid just to see us happy. I appreciate it infinitely more now. When I was pregnant I went to visit my hometown and my friends threw a baby shower for me, and I also had a few birthday presents from people for my birthday the month before. When I was packing to go home, there wasn't room for the baby stuff plus the stuff for me, so I took home all the baby stuff and left my presents behind for my granny to bring up at a later date. And I remember sitting there looking at my suitcase being like, oh, so this is how it's going to be. Sleep is no punishment, it's a gift. Yup, I used to dislike nap times when I was in kindergarten. Now that I'm older, I wish I could take a nap here and there during my work days. Ugh, this 100x. I had a babysitter when I was like 7 tell me that someday I would miss taking naps and wish I could take them. My parents made us take naps on Sunday afternoons to give them a break, or now that I think about it, maybe to have sex. Don't know, don't care. Anyway, I remember thinking how silly that statement was. I would never wish I could take naps. Here I am, 24 years old, and naps are the shit. Teenagers are just kids. It's something I quite literally was not capable of understanding until I wasn't a teenager anymore. When I was a teenager I felt so grown up. And how sometimes, some adults are just kids in adult bodies. Or how adults are simply just flawed human beings too. Used to look up to adults for what's right and wrong, but as we grew older, we kind of realized that adults such as our parents are simply just flawed human beings, and they may not know it all too either. In my teens and 20s, I just couldn't understand how my parents were so oblivious to celebrities. They were all over TV, their names and faces blasted on everything. It seemed everybody had some strong emotionally charged opinion about every major actor, musician, director, or tabloid magnate. What are they, living under a rock? Didn't take long to find out why. Growing up, I didn't have a pre-existing list of these are famous people, I learned them as they came onto the scene. Eventually, though, they all dropped off the list one by one. The list kept updating. It's a lot harder knowing who is a household name when you also have to know who is last week's news. I was only 30 when I realized, I have no idea who famous people are anymore. I just couldn't keep up at all. I've become like my parents. Don't know. And honestly, don't care. Celebrity worship, even as cursory as simply knowing their names, is a vapid, fruitless endeavor. Today's idols are tomorrow's trash. Honestly, this is a great example of what's wrong with parent-child interactions, because when we were kids, we did agree with Ariel. We were persuaded by her emotions and saw her desires as our own. As adults, we have a fully developed brain, hopefully, and more life experience, and therefore we aren't convinced by the ephemeral, but intense emotions, that kids/teenagers have. But rather than validating Ariel's feelings, interests, and desires, Triton's basically like, you're wrong for feeling that way, and also I'm going to destroy your room. Which actually happens. Parents actually do that and are then surprised when the kid turns to the only validating adult in the room, who just might be a soul-stealing witch. I really like revisiting media as an adult, not only to see how my sympathies have changed, but also to make sure that I'm not the adult who is perpetuating the conflict by not listening. Because as an adult, I expect better from myself. Edit, well, just got back from my D&D campaign to find that this exploded. Thank you, kind strangers, for the gold and various awards. Not only did it make me smile uncontrollably, but I think it highlights an important point for all of us, there is power is listening. That everything has shades of gray / is a sliding scale. It is so easy to understand the world as absolutes when young. Suddenly realizing in my late teens / early 20s that basically nothing is an absolute was a total revelation that really steers my understanding of everything and undoubtedly makes me a better person. Love. I thought I loved my wife when I was 20. Now I am 50 and we have been together over 30 years. I realize now that when I was 20 I didn't understand what love is. I hope 70-year-old me looks back on 50-year-old me and says the same thing. A very wise mentor once asked me who the most important person in my life was, to which I replied without thinking, my son. He said something to the effect of, no, he is very important to you and your love is true, but you did not choose him. He is yours and you will love him, but you chose your wife and she will be the most important person for as long as the both of you recognize that. I think about that a lot. On a positive note, there is a freedom to being a grown-up that I didn't grasp as a kid. Just last week, a fourth grader posited the question, "What's it like to be grown up?" My co-teacher and I started to laugh and I said, "Well, it's got its up and downs." Kid asked, "Is it boring to pay bills?" I replied, "Well, that's definitely a down and it's not really boring." I searched in my head for something positive and came up with, "But you know what? I can go to Arby's pretty much any time I want, so there's that." And thus erupted a Zoom screen full of kids in wonder that yes, as a grown-up, you may be able to get Arby's pretty much whenever you want. I even said something like, "You'll understand when you're a grown-up and have a car, but it's pretty cool." And you know what? It is pretty cool. A parent's love for their child. A year after my granddaughter was born, my daughter was telling me how wonderful her toddler is, how smart she is, and just all around lovable she is. She then said, "I don't think I could ever love anyone as much as I love my daughter." Then she paused for a moment as realization washed over her face. "Dad, is this how much you love me?" Bingo, kiddo. Now you know. When I was a kid, my dad and I had a tradition every week of going to the video store and renting a movie or two to watch together. It was one of my favorite things to do, but I remember I used to get really upset at him because every single time we'd actually start to watch the movie he would fall asleep. It wasn't until I was older that I realized that the reason he would fall asleep was because he was exhausted from working two very physically demanding jobs to try and give me the best life he possibly could. On top of that, even though he was tired, he still made an effort to try and start a little tradition with me and spend time with me. Those memories of me having to nudge my dad awake are so great in my eyes, because they made me realize what a caring and hard-working man he was and still is. Edit. Just wanted to add that my dad and I have kept our tradition going in a way, by watching a movie together every month or so. We used to go to the theaters, but obviously COVID has complicated that, so we settle for just watching something together on the couch. We did manage to get a theater to ourselves for his birthday this year. Here is a selfie of the two of us outside of the theater. He still falls asleep sometimes, but I don't mind at all, he deserves it. The value of discipline. You might have all the brains or potential in the world, but without discipline, everything you hold dear to you, all the smarts that you use to validate yourself as an excuse, is snatched away within the blink of an eye. It might have been cool to embody the character of that stereotypical lazy whiz kid, who gets things done when needed, when you were younger, perhaps as an adolescent, as you'd have liked to think that you'd pull it off the same. Years pass by, the laziness, the lack of effective principles starts to take a toll unless reversed, incompetency sets in, lethargy is a hobby, time management is a joke, priorities are misplaced, personal relationships are ruined, and perhaps your lack of discipline might also spiral you into substance abuse, not drugs in general, or other addictions, kickstarting a vicious cycle of pain and suffering. Edit. Remember this: the way you do something, is the way you do everything. Try to understand what this means. If this doesn't scare you, I don't know what else will. This is something I'm slowly realizing and recognizing that I need to work on. I am absolutely a fly by the seat of my pants kinda gal, and also lucky enough that I was born reasonably smart and articulate, enough to overcome some pretty shitty circumstances growing up. But now I'm in my mid-20s, the playing field is leveling off, and my vices and personality flaws, rather than environmental factors, are probably the number one thing that's holding me back from the shit I really want to achieve, where it's less the raw potential that matters, and more the discipline that's needed to refine and direct that energy. I needed to hear this, thanks you /Capital Moose.